A slew of recent reports have made damning accusations about the treatment of detainees in Israeli custody. Nick Christoph's report in the New York Times alleged in lurid terms the sexual abuse of Palestinian prisoners awaiting trial. And last week, the UN Secretary-General added Israel to a list of groups accused of sexual violence in conflict. Well, the UN's report cites multiple cases of violence against prisoners in detention and during interrogations. Critics of the Israeli government, including some in Israel, say that violence against prisoners has been glorified, normalised and often televised. And into that maelstrom stepped Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's national security minister. Israeli forces intercepted a flotilla of 50 boats attempting to deliver aid to Gaza. More than 400 people from 44 different countries were arrested, and the next day Ben-Gvir posted a video of security forces abusing these detainees. The video included footage of him waving an Israeli flag and mocking activists who were tied up on the ground. He'd reportedly forced his way onto the vessel, telling guards he would end their careers.
Free Palestine! Check it. טובה. עבודה טובה. ברוכים הבאים לישראל, אנחנו בעלי הבית. ככה צריך.
It was very easy to condemn Ben-Gvir. In this case, for once, even Netanyahu did. The question is whether this minister, an almost cartoonish villain, is a rogue bad apple or, as many now claim, evidence of a much deeper sickness in a country hardened by conflict. We'll debate all this in a moment, but first I'm joined by Catríona Graham, one of the flotilla detainees you saw prominently in that video. Catríona Graham, welcome to Uncensored. We've all seen the video, but from your perspective, in the moment, what did it feel like was happening to you?
So when we arrived in Ashdod port, this was already after 2 days being held on what was a makeshift prison boat, where we were denied many elements of basic care. A huge amount of violence was perpetrated against many of those in the flotilla. Already by that point, we had many broken bones, many reports of sexual violence, of rape. And so we were all fairly shaken. We were brought through many hours of processing where we were denied access to toilets, to water, to food. And in seeing Ben-Gvir come by, when I was on the flotilla mission last year in 2025, he made a similar effort to do a tour, kind of humiliating those who had participated in the flotilla at that point. So I think in the face of seeing someone who is often the face and the attack dog of many of the Israeli leadership and the kind of system of violence and genocide that they've been perpetuating against the Palestinian people for many years now, it felt very impossible to stay silent and important to speak out however possible in that moment.
Did you feel yourself that you were assaulted?
Absolutely. So I was kidnapped. I was detained twice during this mission, once just off the coast of Crete. And at that point, I was taken out, pulled quite violently. We were cable tied at various points, many people losing feeling in their hands, in their feet. As we were shackled, we had been forced through various abuses, still healing from a bad kick that I got to the thigh. But actually the violence that I experienced was very little compared to many of my comrades. And of course, very, very little compared to the kinds of violence and extreme torture that we know Palestinians are subjected to on a daily basis in Israeli detention.
We've obviously read the Nick Christoph report in the New York Times, which Prime Minister Netanyahu responded by saying he'll be suing Christoph and the paper. Excuse me. And we've also just seen the UN report about further abuses alleged to be committed against Palestinian prisoners. Here, obviously, the number of people on these boats being detained were a multitude of different nations. From what you witnessed and experienced and the shared experiences you've had, are you in any doubt that Israeli forces are capable of committing sexual crimes, in particular against detainees?
I mean, we saw this ourselves. We have had more than a dozen reports of severe sexual assault, of rape, of those who participated in the flotilla. But I don't think we need our evidence. I think there's already decades of evidence of the kinds of severe abuses that are perpetrated against Palestinian political prisoners and hostages in Israeli detention centers. And I think Netanyahu's own response to the video that Ben-Gvir put out is quite telling. He talks about it being against the values of Israel, but these are videos of the kind that he has put out many times in front of Palestinian prisoners and hostages, where he has them subjected to extreme forms of humiliation and talking about the execution legislation that they are working to implement at the moment. So we need to recognize this as part part of a much wider system of continued abuse, continued violence, not only in Israeli detention centers, but across Gaza, across the West Bank. We know that similar sexual abuses go on at the checkpoints where people are just trying to live their daily lives, but are going through severe elements of control in every step of their life. And this is the kind of thing where we need to recognize that our governments have allowed impunity for Israel for far too long. And that is part of why they felt they were emboldened to perpetrate this kind of violence against us as well.
What does it say, do you think, about this Israeli government that someone like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and others in there are allowed to do this kind of thing with no apparent accountability from the Prime Minister or anybody else and just carry on in the government?
I mean, I know yourself tweeted just this morning that the behaviors of some of these individuals is destroying Israeli reputation. But ultimately, we have seen this kind of behavior for decades. I don't think we can put it at the hands of just a few individuals. We have seen decades of abuses against Palestinian people. We have seen decades of attempts at ethnic cleansing. And this is something that has become more extreme in recent years as they've become emboldened. But we're seeing the same kinds of behavior now in Lebanon as well. So we're seeing so many attempts to try and expand this greater Israel project. And we really need to challenge this. They have breached international law many, many times over. There is huge, significant evidence towards this. And yet there is still a lack of accountability at the global level.
What they would say, of course, is they're responding to the horrors of October the 7th, which most people view as an appalling terrorist attack on the Israeli people. What was your view of what happened that day?
So I think any targeting of civilians, no matter who is doing that targeting, is absolutely wrong. But people who say, well, Israel has the right to self-defense, how is it self-defense when we have now seen more than 92,000 people murdered since October the 7th by Israel? We have seen, even since the so-called ceasefire agreement was called, more than 900 people murdered by Israel. Just at the start of Eid, there were 10 more people murdered by Israel in Palestine, in Gaza, including 5 children. We have still seen the ongoing detention of Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, who is a pediatrician, and yet released detainees have reported seeing him stripped naked and having dogs set on him. So this is the kind of behavior that Israel continues to perpetuate. And so we need to make sure that there is real accountability by government leaders and not just condemnation in words.
Catríona Graham, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you.